Hey guys, Sean here. Today I'll be profiling my new and improved Exodia deck. With the recent support in Infinite Forbidden, Exodia has evolved into becoming the best deck in the game. A lot of really cool new cards for Exodia. The deck is super fun, it can play a lot of really cool cards in it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We begin with Exodia himself. You cannot play Exodia without all 5 pieces of the king himself. The 5 pieces are important because of your Millennium Ankh. You have to reveal all 5 pieces to be able to fusion summon your unstoppable Exodia Incarnate, which is your new fusion monster. But of course, we can always still draw into all 5 pieces and win instantly. Because we have to run the 5 pieces, you can easily run like over 40 cards. In this build I run 44, because you definitely don't want to see them in your opening hand. You can even go higher if you want, but I think 44 is good for this build. But all 5 pieces of Exodia are essential. Onto the new Millennium cards now. We run 3 copies of your Shield of the Millennium Dynasty. So all the Millennium cards, what they do is that you can place them in your spell and trap card zone as continuous spells, and then you can summon them from the spell and trap card zone by either paying 2000 life points or revealing a Millennium Ankh in your hand. All the Millennium cards share this effect, but each Millennium card has a different effect. So Shield is one of the most important starters of the deck because when it's summoned, you can add a Millennium Ankh from your deck to your hand. Millennium Ankh is really important because it's the main way you get into your new fusion monster, and it means that if you have this in your hand and other Millennium monsters, you can use this first, search your Millennium Ankh, and then whenever you try to summon more Millennium monsters, you can just reveal it instead of paying 2k. So we run 3 copies of your Shield. Next up, 2 copies of your Golem that guards the Millennium Treasures. He's a Millennium monster, so you place him in the spell trap card zone, pay 2k to special summon him. While he's on the field, your opponent cannot negate the activation of your Millennium Ankh, which is really cool. So it gives really good protection to your Millennium Ankh. And on summon, it searches a Wedju Temple, which is your new field spell for the deck. Not the most important card for the deck. It is good, but it's not one of your main starters, so you can get away with running 2. Next up, probably your best starter in the deck, we have 3 copies of your Sengenjin. Sengenjin is level 8, he's pretty beefy with 2750 attack. You summon him the same way as all your other Millennium monsters, and on summon he adds a Millennium monster from your deck to your hand. So your main combo, you'll be summoning this, getting a Millennium monster which will be your Shield, using your Shield to get your Millennium Ankh, and then using your Millennium Ankh to summon your new Exodia monster. So the best starter in the deck, definitely run out of 3. So that's your main Exodia engine. Now we move on to some more generic stuff. We have triple Lava Golem. You really don't normal summon in this deck, so you don't really need your normal summon. Lava Golem is such a great card for just destroying your opponent's board. Very old school as well to be playing Lava Golem in an Exodia deck, really takes you back. You can also play stuff like Sphere Mode, which is another really good kaiju, but I think for now, triple Lava Golem is all you need. Onto the hand traps, we have triple Ash Blossom, just, the most generic, good hand trap in the game. You can't really go wrong with this card. We have triple Dim Shifter. Dim Shifter, of course, is just a really good card in the meta. You discard it, and then any card that goes to the grave will be banished instead. It's really good in Exodia, because things don't really go to your graveyard. All your Millennium monsters can be brought back to the spell trap card zone if you have your Wedju Temple on field, instead of being sent to grave. Your Millennium Ankh specifically shuffles itself back into the deck after you activate it, instead of going to grave. And even if an Exodia piece gets banished and you're trying to go for the Exodia win con, your new trap card Exxod Flames can bring a banished Exodia piece back from the grave. So Dim Shifter works really well in the deck, definitely one of the main reasons why you'd play this deck. And finally, triple Spooky Dogwood. I know it's kind of a meme, but it does have a purpose in this deck. So of course helps you win for time, but it also can act as kind of a maxi effect where your opponent doesn't want to summon too many monsters, so they might end on a weaker board than they would have otherwise. All the hand traps in this deck also discard, they don't send to grave, so they can all be played under Shifter. And the main reason we run this is because your new Exodia boss monster gains attack equal to your life points. So if you're going second, you can activate Spooky Dogwood, gain a bunch of life points, and then your Exodia fusion monster can be boosted up super high, and you can pretty much attack for a game. You can definitely put this on the side, you can definitely just replace this with something else, but I think it's a really cool option for the deck. That's it for the monsters. Onto the spells now. We have 1 copy of Obliterate Blaze. It's a quick play spell. You can make 1 level 10 Exodia monster on the field gain this effect. You can pay half your life points to destroy all spells and traps on the field, and then you equip as many Forbidden One pieces from your hand deck or grave to your Exodia monster, and they each boost it up by 2k. So if you equip all 5 Exodia pieces, your Exodia will be 10k attack, and it also allows them to do piercing. Really good for going for game. It can be even used to destroy your opponent's back row, which is great as well. The only issue is you do need a spell trap on the field. It's specifically spell and trap guard zone, so it can't destroy anything in your field zones. and to activate the effect you do need to have at least one spell trap on the field to be able to be destroyed. So it is a bit of a limitation, but most of the time you'll be using this card to OTK your opponent, and we can search it, so 1 copy is really good. Next up, 3 copies of the most important card in the deck, Millennium Ankh. So what Millennium Ankh does is that you can reveal 5 pieces of Exodia from your hand, deck, or field, and then you'll special summon your new fusion monster, the Unstoppable Exodia Incarnate, from your extra deck. But then you have to shuffle all monsters you control into the deck besides Exodia or Millennium monsters. And after you use this effect, you cannot summon for the rest of the turn. And instead of going to grave, this card will be shuffled back into your deck. So a really important card for the deck. Obviously you have to reveal this to summon your Millennium monsters. Plenty of ways to search this as well. You will need to use this as your last play in your turn. So keep that in mind, it can be a bit tricky to use, but it's very strong. So we gotta run 3 copies. Next up for the field spell, we have double Wedju Temple. A pretty good card in the deck. So during the main phase, you can place 1 monster from your hand to your spell trap card zone, and then you can place 1 Millennium monster from your deck to your spell trap card zone. And it also has the effect to where if your Millennium monsters would be destroyed, you can place them in the spell trap card zone instead of sending them to grave. So basically turns all your Millennium monsters into crystal beasts, putting them into the spell trap card zone instead of sending them to grave, which means that you can use them for follow-up, and you can also keep your graveyard clear so you can use your dim shifter. So a really good card in the deck. It can basically get you into any of your Millennium monsters, which are your starters, so really important for the deck. Definitely at least run 2. For another field spell, we run 1 Secret Village of the Spellcasters, which is really good because our Exodia pieces and our Exodia fusion monster are spellcasters. So while you control a spellcaster monster, your opponent cannot activate spell cards, but if you don't control a spellcaster, you can't activate spell cards. So it can be a really strong floodgate. Stopping your opponent from activating spell cards is really good. It might be a bit tricky to set up because you need to have a spellcaster on the field. Your Millennium monsters are not spellcasters, but your Exodias are. But it can be really good when you pull it off, and in combination with set rotation, it is fantastic. Set rotation says you can set a field spell to both your field and your opponent's field, and then neither player can activate field spells besides the ones that are set. So you can activate this to get your Secret Village, so you can activate it to stop your opponent from activating spells, or you can use it to give yourself Wedju Temple and give your opponent your Secret Village. So if they're using a deck that relies on a field spell, let's say something like Yugioh, they won't be able to activate it because they're going to be forced to activate Secret Village first. So this is just another really cool little package Exodia can run. Next up, newly limited to 1, we have Pot of Prosperity. We have a lot of extra room in the extra deck, so we can use this to dig deeper for some cards. The 1 copy is not too bad. It would be better if we had 3 copies, but 1 copy is fine. Definitely run it in the deck. Next up, triple Super Poly. We have a lot of extra deck room, so we just run Super Poly targets. Great for breaking boards, great for getting some extra damage on field. Just a really good card in certain metas. Thankfully, it wasn't hitting the ban list, so that's great. Super Poly is always just a fantastic card to have. Can break boards, you can't respond to it, which is fantastic. So definitely run 3 copies because we have the room in the extra deck to run the Super Poly targets. Onto the traps now, we have 2 copies of Exxod Fires of Rage. You can run 1 copy if you'd like. I just think 2 copies is really good because it's always good to have the 2nd copy. What it does is, if you control a level 10 Exodia monster, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. Which on its own is insane because your new Exodia boss monster can search this, which is crazy. And if this card is in the graveyard except the turn it was sent there, you can add 1 Forbidden One monster from your deck or grave to your hand, or you can shuffle up to 5 of your Exodia pieces from your grave or banishment into your deck. So in case you're going for the Exodia win con, and 1 of your Exodia pieces gets banished, you can use this card to bring it back into your deck. So an insanely good card. For the board wipe alone, it's just fantastic. I like to run 2 copies. Again, you can cut it down to 1, but there's no real downside in running more than 40 cards in this deck. You don't want to see your Exodia pieces in your opening hand, so running more cards is not too bad, and it's pretty much always good to see this card. So 2 copies is nice. Next we have Obliterate. This is a continuous trap that lets you send 1 Forbidden One or Exodia monster from your hand or deck to the grave to bounce a card on the field. Also, if this card is sent from field to grave, you can target 1 Forbidden One monster or Exodia card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So a really cool card in the deck. Again, you can set this off of your new Exodia monster. So really good to have. Being able to constantly bounce your opponent's cards is really nice. And if it gets destroyed, you can get some recursion, which is great. Next up, we have 1 copy of There Can Only Be One. And There Can Only Be One is correct because this card is limited to 1. It's just a great card to have in the deck. Each player can only control 1 monster of each type. All our Millennium cards are different types. Our Exodias are Spellcasters. All our extra deck cards are pretty much different types as well. So it's really good at shutting down certain decks. We run the 1 copy because why not? If we draw it, it's great, and if we don't draw it, it's whatever. We don't really rely on it too much. Just a nice floodgate to have. If it's at 1, why not run it at 1? And finally, triple Imperm to round out the deck. Just a great card to have, another great hand trap in the deck. In total, we run 12 hand traps. We run the triple Ash, the triple Imperm, the Ghost Sister, Spooky Dogwood, and the Shifter. I think it's a pretty good hand trap ratio because we also run board breakers like our Lava Golem and our Super Poly. So 3 Imperms around out the deck, pretty good. Okay, onto the extra deck now. We run 3 copies of the Unstoppable Exodia Incarnate. It's a level 10 Exodia monster, which is important for your Exodia effects. Cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects. Once per turn when this card battles, it gains attack equal to your own life points. This is a permanent increase, so you can get your Exodia up to really big attack amounts. It also just has a spell and trap negate. If your opponent activates a spell or trap, you can just negate it, which is insane. Also, during the end phase, you can set one Exxod or Obliterate spell trap from your deck. So this can set your Exxod Flames for a board wipe, or your Obliterate for a bounce. And during your standby phase, you have to pay 1k. Not really a downside, 1k is a very small price to pay for such a strong monster. The way you summon this is by using your Millennium Ankh, reveal 5 pieces of Exodia, and special summon him. Just an insanely strong card, the whole deck revolves around him, so definitely run him at 3. Onto the Super Poly targets, we run 1 Mudragon, 1 Garura, and 1 Starving Venom. Mudragon needs 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. Garura needs 2 monsters with the same type and attribute. And Starving Venom needs 2 dark monsters. All our Exodia pieces are dark, and our Exodia Fusion are dark, and we run plenty of other dark monsters in the extra deck. These are just the best generic Super Poly targets you can play, so if you're going to run Super Poly, definitely consider running these cards. Next up, onto the links, we have 1 Relinquished Anima, mainly because your Exodia pieces are level 1, so if you only have that in hand, normal summon an Exodia piece, link it into Anima, and then you can maybe steal a monster. Not too important, but it's pretty cool, so you might as well run it 1 copy. Next up, we have a little package here of Ausa, Dark, and Selene. So your Ausa needs 2 monsters including an Earth. All of our Millennium cards are Earth, so we can go into this. You're not really going to be stealing your opponent's Earth monsters, but the main reason we run it is to go into Selene, which needs a Spellcaster. Dark is the same thing. The only darks in your deck are your Exodia pieces, so you might be able to go into this, steal your opponent's dark monster, then go into Selene. Selene can bring back a Spellcaster from the graveyard, so you can bring back an Exodia piece. You definitely have enough spells in the deck to be able to use Selene's effect, especially because your Millennium pieces will be counted as spells while on the field. And the main reason we run all this is so we can link climb into Access Code, which is another fantastic boss monster in the deck. It can pop a bunch of cards and it can help you go for an OTK, so definitely run this little package right here. Another cool package is the IP into your Nightmare cards. So we have your IP Masquerena, Nightmare Phoenix to pop spell traps, and your Nightmare Unicorn to bounce cards. So they're really good for going first and second. Ending on an IP can be really good because you can just go into Phoenix and Unicorn on your opponent's turn to disrupt them. And they're good for being aggressive on your own turn. When SP gets reprinted into tins, that would be another great card to add to this deck. So definitely run a little IP Masquerena engine here. And to round out the deck, we have 1 copy of your Typhon. You can turn any one of your monsters into Typhon if your opponent has special summoned 2 extra deck monsters during the previous turn. Prevent either player from activating the effects of monsters with over 3k attack, which doesn't really affect us, but it can affect our opponent really well. And even detach a material to bounce a card. So if you're going second and all you have is an Exodia piece, you can summon it and then overlay into Typhon, and then you might have a chance to come back. So a nice little card to round out the deck. So that's it for my new and improved Exodia deck profile. Exodia has become a really fun deck, a really cool deck. It can definitely take games. It's really cool to see Exodia see some relevance again after all these years. Being able to run really strong cards like Shifter, like Lava Golem, like your Secret Village, they're really strong. They really give you an edge when you're playing a deck like Exodia. So it's really great to be able to run those cards. The deck is really open to interpretation. You can run cards like Super Poly and Lava Golem, but you can also run other cards because they're not mandatory. They work really well with the deck, but they're definitely not mandatory. So you can build this deck in a lot of different ways. But this is just my preferred way to play Exodia. So thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments, and stay tuned for more Exodia content.